بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد أما بعد. Reading from the book Al-Wajiz في فقه السنة والكتاب العزيز. The book called Al-Wajiz في فقه السنة والكتاب العزيز, which means a comprehensive work which is summarized and concise but thorough on the fiqh directly taken from the Sunnah and the Quran. It is authored by Dr. Abdul Azim Badawi with the introduction of several different mashayikh and ulama. On page 120, the author says, Salatul Kusuf, says the prayer of the Kusuf. إذا خسف القمر وكسفت الشمس أو خسف القمر وكسفت الشمس, obviously different ways of saying it. استحب أن ينادى الصلاة جامعة. The first point of his book or this chapter, he says, whenever there is a solar or lunar eclipse, it is recommended for a call to be made, for a nida, like an adhan, to be made, as-salah jami'ah, as-salah jami'ah, the prayer in congregation. How many times is it to be said? It doesn't state here, but at least once. He says, عن عبد الله بن عمرو رضي الله عنه قال لما كسفت الشمس أو كسفت الشمس على عهد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم نودي إن الصلاة جامعة. He says here, Abdullah ibn Amr radiallahu anhu narrates, he says, لما كسفت الشمس أو كسفت الشمس, he says when there was a lunar eclipse, a solar eclipse, not sonar, not lunar, that's a mistake of the tongue. When there was a solar eclipse. In the time of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he commanded someone to call out, Inna salata jami'ah, the prayers to be made in congregation. This hadith, the author says, muttafaqun alayh, is collected by Bukhari, Muslim, and he also says An-Nasa'i. Next point, he says, فإذا اجتمع الناس في المسجد صلى بهم الإمام ركعتين على نحو ما جاء في هذا الحديث. He says, so when the people congregate, when they've heard the nida, they've come to the masjid, the imam should lead them in prayer. The imam should lead them in prayer. In 2 units of prayer. 2 rak'ah in prayer. Based on the following hadith. عن عائشة رضي الله تعالى عنها قالت خسفت الشمس في حياة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فخرج إلى المسجد فصف الناس وراءه فكبر فاقترأ رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قراءة طويلة ثم كبر فركع ركوعا طويلا ثم قال سمع الله لمن حمده فقام ولم يسجد وقرأ قراءة طويلة هي أدنى من القراءة الأولى ثم كبر وركع ركوعا طويلا وأدنى من الركوع الأول ثم قال سمع الله لمن حمده ربنا ولك الحمد ثم سجد ثم قال في الركعة الآخرة مثل ذلك فاستكمل 4 ركعات في 4 سجدات وانجلت الشمس قبل أن ينصرف. He says the hadith Aisha has reported, there was a solar eclipse during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, so he went out to the masjid. And the people, they stood in rows and lines behind him. He made takbir, and he began to recite the Quran for a very long time. Then he made ruku after he made takbir for a very long time. Then he said, Sami Allahu liman hamida, and he stood without going back into sujood. And he recited the Quran once more. He went back into the original qiyam, in other words. And this standing wasn't as long as the first one. Then he made takbir. Then he made ruku another time for a very long time, not like the first ruku. Then he came up again and said, Sami Allahu liman hamida. Then it was said, Rabbana wa lakal hamd. Then he made the sujood. Then he did the exact same thing in the second rak'ah. So he made ruku 4 times and sujood 4 times, only in 2 rak'ah. Everybody clear on this? Only in 2 rak'ah. Aisha radhiyallahu anha narrates, she says, and afterwards the eclipse was over before he finished the prayer and the people left. The author says in the footnotes, muttafaqun alayh, This is hadith is collected once again by Al-Bukhari and Muslim as well. So this shows us the way, or one of the ways, the style, or one of the styles of making Salatul Kusuf. So we benefit from the book so far, according to the author, first and foremost, is that it's made congregation. It's made in congregation, not by yourself. Secondly, 2 rak'ah. But it's a bit different than a normal prayer, Jum'ah or Eid. Rather, you're going to make ruku' 4 times. Sujood 4 times. Sajadat. 4 sajadat only in 2 rak'ah. Only in 2 rak'ah. So going back once more. Let's break it down once more to make it clear. He recited for a very long time. Another recommended act is recite for a long time. Then go into ruku' for a very long time. Come out of ruku' and say Sami Allahu liman hamida. Make the normal ruku', coming out of ruku', and do what? Don't go into sujood as you normally would. Rather, recite once more. Go back into a normal qiyam with your hands where you place your hands and recite again. Recite again. Recite like you would normally recite in the normal qiyam. Recite like you would normally recite in the normal qiyam. How would you normally recite in normal qiyam? What would you recite? What surah? Just like that. Very long, but not as long as the first one. Then you would do what? Go into ruku' again for a very long time, but not like the first. Then you say Sami Allahu liman hamida, Rabbana wa lakal hamd. Then you make the sujood. How many times do you make the sujood? You're going to make the sujood in all 4 times. 2 sujoods in 1 rak'ah. But 4 ruku'. You're going to make double ruku'. Everybody clear on this? Double ruku'. Hopefully that's clear. So that's a brief description of how to pray Salatul Kusuf or Khusuf. Moving forward, the author says, Al-Khutbatu ba'da Salah. He says, the sermon after the Salah. The sermon after the Salah. يسن للإمام إذا سلم من الصلاة أن يخطب الناس فيعظهم ويذكرهم ويحثهم على العمل الصالح. He says it is recommended. He doesn't say obligatory. He says recommended. That after the Imam leads the people in the Salah, he makes the taslim, he finishes the prayer, to give the khutbah and to exhort the people, to remind them, to admonish them, to shake them up, to scare them. And he says, and to encourage them to do righteousness. عن عائشة رضي الله عنها أن الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم صلى يوم خسفت الشمس أو خسفت الشمس ثم ذكرت صفة الصلاة قال ثم سلم وقد تجلت الشمس فخطب الناس فقال في كسوف الشمس والقمر إنهما آيتان من آيات الله لا يخسفان لموت أحد ولا لحياته فإذا رأيتموهما فافزعوا إلى الصلاة. وعن أسماء رضي الله تعالى عنها أنها قالت لقد أمر النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بالعتاقة في كسوف الشمس. He says here, narrated Aisha رضي الله عنها, when there was a solar eclipse during the time of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu, and then she went on to mention the description of the prayer. After the eclipse was done, he gave a khutbah to the people. And he said regarding the sun and the moon and the eclipse of the two, they're signs of Allah. There's never eclipse for someone's death or birth, a great man, a wise man, a leader. La, that doesn't happen. He says, so whenever you see that, run to the salah. فَافْزَعُوا إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ. Hurry, rush forth, and hasten to the salah. He says in the footnotes, this hadith once more is agreed upon by Bukhari and Muslim. He mentions the narration of Asma radiallahu anha that during the solar eclipse, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded for slaves to be freed. He ordered the people to free their slaves, to manumit slaves. In other words, do a major righteous deed. A major righteous deed. Righteousness. He says this hadith is collected by Al-Bukhari. Moving forward, the author says, وعن أبي موسى رضي الله تعالى عنه قال خسفت الشمس فقام النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فزعا يخشى أن تكون الساعة فأتى المسجد فصلى بأطول قيام وركوع وسجود رأيته قط يفعله وقال هذه الآيات التي يرسل الله لا تكون لموت أحد ولا لحياته ولكن يخوف الله بها عباده فإذا رأيتم شيئا من ذلك فافزعوا إلى ذكره ودعائه واستغفاره. narrated Abu Musa radiallahu ta'ala anhu, one day there was an eclipse on the time of the Prophet ﷺ, so he stood up and he ran. He was afraid and scared, fazi'an, hurrying up. He ran very quickly. He dashed. He jetted forward. Yakhsha, he says, fear that it was the hour, the sa'ah, the last day coming. And then he went to the masjid. He prayed. He stood. He made ruku'. He made sujood in a manner that I've never seen him do. Very, very, very long and lengthy. And he said, and these signs that Allah sends are not for the life or death of a great man or a great woman. He says, but there are things that Allah causes slaves to be fearful and afraid. He caused them to be fearful and afraid therewith. He shakes them up therewith. He scares them through these major signs, this phenomena. It says, so whenever you see anything like this, then run and rush forth to his dhikr, to his dua, and to his istighfar, asking Allah to forgive you, praying to Allah, calling out to Allah. The author says this hadith is graded upon by Al-Bukhari and Muslim. The author then says, وظاهر قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم فافزعوا إلى آخره الوجوب. He says when the Prophet ﷺ says فافزعوا, a commanding verb, go and run and race forth, commanding the people to pray. He says that which is apparent, that which is ظاهر, obviously taken from this is that this prayer of eclipse is mandatory, wajib. He says فتكون صلاة الكسوف فرض أو فرض كفاية. He says thus the kusuf is an obligation upon the community as a whole, and not upon every single individual, but a community. Someone has to do it. Some Muslims have to do it. The Muslims in a town or place, they must make this prayer. كما قال أبو عوانة في صحيحه بيان وجوب صلاة كسوف ثم ساق بعض الأحاديث الصحيحة في الأمر بها، وهو ظاهر صنيع بن خزيمة في صحيح أنه قال فيه باب الأمر بالصلاة إن كسوف الشمس والقمر، وذكر أيضا بعض الأحاديث في الأمر بها. The author, he says, this is stated by the great hadith master Abu Awana in his Sahih. As we said before, other ulama of hadith, they wrote books that were considered Sahih to them. They wrote books with the intention of only authentic narrations as the main purpose. Not saying that they won't mention some weak narrations on the side to prove and show that they're weak, which is a well-known style of all of the ulama who wrote books on Sahih, Bukhari, Muslim, and the list goes on. But that's a very long discussion that we can't get into right now. But the original purpose is to prove and show that these narrations are authentic. Moving forward, the author, he says, that Abu Awana, he said, Bayan wujubi salatil kusuf. He says, the clarification that the prayer of the eclipse is mandatory. Then he went on to quote, the author says, many authentic hadiths regarding the amr, the command to do it. And this is also what's obvious of Ibn Khuzaymah, rahimahullah, another alim, a great alim who died in the beginning of the 4th century, Ibn Khuzaymah, with regards to his book was As-Sahih. He wrote a book as well, As-Sahih. It wasn't just Bukhari and Muslim. Obviously, Bukhari and Muslim, they were known, they were famous, they were renowned. They were from the best of their time, if not the best of their time. Their books are amazing books. But there are other scholars who wrote books on Sahih traditions as well, as we have explained in our lessons on the compilation of the Sunnah. He says, Ibn Khuzaymah said in his Sahih, Bab al-Amr, the command, he says the chapter heading, the command to pray when there is a solar or lunar eclipse. And then he mentioned the authentic hadith in which the Prophet commanded the people to pray. Before we move forward, this goes to show the fiqh of Ahl al-Hadith. The fiqh of Ahl al-Hadith. And they put their chapter headings as their madhabs. Those are the milestones, the road signs for their madhabs. What do I believe on an issue? In the chapter heading. What is to be done on this issue? In the chapter heading. It doesn't mean the ulama of hadith were stupid and dumb and they didn't know what they were talking about. And they didn't understand fiqh because they didn't spend 10 pages discussing it. وفي رواية وفي لفظ وفي وجه وقال الأصحاب وقال فلان وهو أصح وهي أصح وهو الأرجح في قول شاذ في war, as the fuqaha do later on, the later fuqaha. And anyone who didn't discuss fiqh and their manner of discussing it, or anyone who didn't deal with jadal, with this argumentation and this hypothetical things, ara'ayta, in kana, in wajada, in hasala, in kharaja. If they mention all types of weird and peculiar things that would never take place and happen. And many of these fuqaha, they looked down upon Ahlul Hadith and they disrespected them. And they talked about them as being donkeys and mules and asses. And they only did was memorize. That's all they did, was know things, memorize things. That was it. They didn't have no fiqh. They didn't have any understanding. Because they didn't deal with the fiqh like we chose to deal with it. And the long discussions, taking one imam as an imam to blindly follow, and spending one's entire life in one madhab, and sticking to this and attacking other madhabs. It does not mean they didn't understand. It does not mean they didn't have the ability to do what you did, but that's how they chose to write their books. And this was their fiqh, which is clear, simple, and easily understood. As some of the ulama would mention of the past, or will be said about them, or some of them would say, I never dealt with kalam, meaning the theological rhetoric. I never did that. I never specialized and I never involved myself in that. But if I did do it, know for sure that I would be good at it. It doesn't mean just because they didn't do it that they weren't good at it and they didn't have the ability and they didn't have the intellectual fortitude. We find this even to this day. When in the Prophet's city, sallallahu studying the college of hadith, brothers would say, why you go to the college of hadith? Wallahi, some mashayikh, some teachers, some doctors, some ulama, they would say this to us. When we wanted to go to the master's program, Sheikh, a well-known teacher of mine, Sheikh of mine, I need a letter of recommendation. He said, sure, Sheikh Muhammad, Faddal, ahlan wa sahlan. I'll write you a letter of recommendation, no problem. We know you to be a good student. But why you want to go to the college of hadith for your master's? Do aqidah, do sharia, do fiqh. Write a letter to the wakil, to the mudir, and tell him to make an exception to allow you to go to college of sharia. Even though the college of sharia, the people, they don't take those in their master's program unless they went and studied the bachelor's. But one teacher, he said to me, he said, I'll tell you his name, but I won't mention it. He says, don't go to hadith. He said, your people can't benefit from hadith. They can't learn from hadith in America. Study fiqh, sharia. He says, and maybe you can write a letter, or maybe I can write you a letter in which they'll make an exception just for you because you're a good, brilliant student, you're from America, and you can study your masters of fiqh and sharia. I didn't say anything. I didn't argue with him. It's my teacher, it's my sheikh. I want a letter of recommendation from him for this school. I'm not going to argue with him. I didn't agree with him. It did not make sense to me. So basically what you're saying is, sheikh, or what the other madhabi people, the people in America, he's a Shafi'i, I'm a Hanbali, I'm Hanafi. If you're not Maliki, you have no fiqh. Some brothers will say, if you don't have a madhab, then you're Zahiri. You don't have no fiqh. You don't understand fiqh. You can't give a fatwa. Or as one brother said, who was studying in Egypt, and he saw one of the videos on hadithdisciple, he said, the way he's answering questions is not right. You can't answer questions like that. You can't address an issue like that. You have to address it with a specific way, according to the specific way the people of the fiqh do it, and the madhabs. And all of that kalam. That's false and that's futile. Just because a person doesn't want to do it in your specific way, and just because a person specializes in hadith, that means that he's weak in fiqh. This was going through my mind. So I was saying to myself, yeah, sheikh. So if I'm a master's in hadith, that means I don't know sharia, I don't know fiqh, and I can't have strength in it, I can't help my people out. Or some people say, the people who don't need Bukhari's manhaj. One brother from the UK said, he dropped out of the college of hadith, and he says, I'm going to the college of da'wah. He says, because my mother can't benefit from the madhab of Imam Bukhari in his book. That's what he said. Wallah al-azim. I won't mention the brother's name. He said, he's brother from Birmingham. He said, I can't benefit from the madhab of my grandmother. Kafir grandmother is not going to learn from the madhab of Bukhari in his book. La ilaha illallah. And there were countless other people who tried to discourage me from going to the college of hadith in the first place, let alone the master's program in hadith. And they would say, you're not going to understand fiqh. You can't give da'wah, so on and so forth. You won't understand the Quran. So the question is, if a person specializes in a thing, it automatically means that they're weak in something else? It doesn't mean that. Rather, there's takhassus. Or, if that's your argument, there are different things that are unsuited for the general person, which we agree with. There are things in aqidah, there are things in fiqh and tafsir that are way beyond the scope of the average Muslim, and they're totally unsuitable for the average Muslim, and they will cause shubuhat, doubts in the heart of the average Muslim, in aqidah and in fiqh. You're not going to mention the 12 views, and Ghazali said this, and Muhammad ibn Hassan said that, and Abu Yusuf said that, and this one, and Imam Ahmad and Malik, he said he should be beaten and whipped and fulan. You're not going to mention that either. So we can't disrespect hadith and the sciences of hadith. And the ulama of hadith, they were fuqaha as well. They differed in their levels of fiqh and their mastery of it, but those who wrote the books, they were fuqaha as well. And the fiqh is proven by the masterful way in which they wrote their books. As the author is saying here, Ibn Khuzaymah, and he says Abu Awana. And we also benefit from the speech here of the author, is that when they say there's ijma' on an issue, no mujtahid took this view. No one took this opinion that it's obligatory, it's haram to do this, you can't do that, it's not makruh, so on and so forth. And they ignore many of the views of the ulama of hadith, because they say if he's from the hadith school, he doesn't have a traditional school. If he doesn't have a traditional school, then it doesn't count. And that's incorrect and that's wrong. Who or what is the reason why you exclude one alim from the rest of the ulama? And don't take the view of this person. He's not mujtahid? Is he not a great alim? Of course he is, so his opinion matters. So that's incorrect. Khairan inshallah. The author, he then concludes the chapter by saying, قال الحافظ في الفتح. He says, Al-Hafidh bin Hajar says in Fath al-Bari, the Sharh of Sahih Bukhari, فَالْجُمْهُورُ عَلَى أَنَّهَا السُنَّةٌ مُؤَكَّدَةٌ. He says most of the ulama hold the view, not all, but most, is that the prayer for the eclipse is highly recommended. The prayer for the eclipse is highly recommended. وصرح أبو عوانة في صحيحه بوجوبها ولم أر لغيره. He says, and Abu Awana, this alim here, he clearly stated that it's mandatory in his book, his Sahih. He says, and I never saw anyone else from the ulama saying that it was mandatory. إلا ما حكي عن مالك أنه أجراها مجرى الجمعة. Except for, he says, except for that which is narrated, that Imam Malik treated the eclipse prayer like Jumu'ah. Imam Malik treated the eclipse prayer like Jumu'ah prayer. What's the ruling on Jumu'ah? How is important making Jumu'ah? What's the sin of not making Jumu'ah? Like that. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah then says, وَالنَّقَلَ الزَّيْنِ ibn al-Munayyir عن أبي حنيفة أنه أوجبها. He says, and another alim, Ibn al-Munayyir, he reported that Abu Hanifa said that it's mandatory. وكذا نقل بعض مصنف الحنفية أو حنفية أنها واجبة. He says, and also some Hanafi scholars, بعض الحنفية, those who wrote books and who dealt with the discussion of the madhab and formulating and synthesizing and recording and documenting the madhab, some of them held the view that it was wajibah. Some of the Hanafi scholars. So that's the end of the chapter. So we see that the kusuf, the prayer, it should be made. Most of the ulama hold the view that it is not obligatory. Some hold the view that it is obligatory. If you get an opportunity to make the kusuf, if you have a small congregation, 2 brothers, a brother, your wife, your son, your uncle, your father, your mother-in-law, your father-in-law, if you can go to your local masjid, your local mosque, that's the thing that you should do. We ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to allow us to benefit from the reminder. If we have life tomorrow, if Allah gives us life to see this solar eclipse, which some of the experts say will come around maybe every 100 years. So it's considered to be a rare opportunity. And as some people may say, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. As we were in the antique shop earlier, here in South Carolina, we were in the store buying some, alhamdulillah, some nice antiques, walillah alhamd, which is also a part of hadith disciple culture. Antique things, classic things. And the non-Muslims who owned the shop, they were conversing with us. It was a man and his wife, 2 older people. And they weren't Muslims. Most cases, they were probably Christian. And they were laughing and joking and talking with us as we were purchasing and buying things. They were showing us different antiques, the ancient things that we were trying to buy and purchase. And they said, when are you guys going back to New York? And we said, inshallah, tomorrow we're going back to New York. So, you should stay. In South Carolina, you're going to be in a position or an angle to see the eclipse in a very, very, very good, clear position. It may be, absolutely dark for a short period of time. You should stay and see it. And the guy, he said to me, he says, you won't have another chance to see it again. He said, you won't have another chance to see it again. Meaning, every 100 years, what's the chances of me living to be 133? I'm from 33 years old right now. What's the chance of me living to be 133? It's possible. We know that. But it's unlikely for someone to live for 133 years. Only Allah knows. Only Allah truly knows. Let alone if you live to be 133 years, what is going to be your condition? Are you being able to get up and stand up and pray and see it? So this is what he said to us. So we ask Allah to allow us to see it and to benefit from it. To take the maw'idah with regards to when this life is going to come to an end. As Allah talks about the sun and the moon in the Quran, and as many of his pious predecessors, many of them used to say, when you want to see Yawm al-Qiyamah, then read Surah al-Takwir. Or someone may have said Surah al-Infitar. إذا الشمس كورت. وهكذا. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد.